The third episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier just dropped on Disney+, so it's time for a half-season review. Which is kind of silly when I think about it, because this is a miniseries. And miniseries don't have seasons, that's why it's called a miniseries. Wait, is that why it's called a miniseries? So the story takes place a few months after the events of Endgame. Bucky is dealing with his guilt about being a literal Terminator for Hydra, and Sam makes the decision not to become the next Captain America. And so far, I'm really loving this show. I like that this series feels more like a movie. We've had these big, expensive action set pieces on almost every episode, and as much as I like the action in the show, I've said it before, one of the things that Marvel does best is drama. Because so far, these Marvel shows take on real human drama. WandaVision was all about grief. And so far, this one seems to be about feeling like you belong, like you matter. I've seen people online complaining about the social commentary, but Marvel Comics have a history with that. It's in their DNA, especially the ones written by Stan Lee. You see, Stan knew that his superheroes were great, but the stories he wrote were more about how the people with superpowers related to the world. And it's that same sort of humanity I see in these shows from Marvel Studios. And I love that the underlying theme in this show is all about race, because it asks the question, is the world ready for a black Captain America? But the first episode was very much about Bucky coming to terms with the things he's done in the past. And Bucky shares the same tragedy of Cap, which is a man out of time not feeling like he belongs. But I must say that after seeing the second episode, Sam becomes an equally interesting character. It becomes more and more clear that he's reluctant to take on the mantle of Cap because he doesn't feel like people would accept him. And that's something Sam and Bucky have in common.
So maybe he was wrong about you, and if he was wrong about you, then he was wrong about me.
That scene in the second episode where they knock on Isaiah Bradley's door was extremely well done. Do yourself a favor and read Captain America Truth. That'll tell you everything you need to know about Isaiah Bradley. I love that Marvel puts a spotlight on his story because it's an interesting one and also very timely. But besides the social commentary, the drama, and the action, I also really dig the back and forth banter of Sam and Bucky.
I have all of that on camera, you know that, right?
It feels like a Shane Black Lethal Weapon script, and I can watch that all day. By the way, John Walker, the so-called new Captain America, played by Kurt Russell's son Wyatt, is not supposed to be liked. This is a minor spoiler if you don't read the comics, but he's gonna get much, much worse when he becomes US agent. But I do like his introduction in the second episode. We can see the contrast between him and Steve Rogers. And he's not acting like a complete dick just yet, but trust me when I say it's coming. I enjoyed episode 3, but I felt it wasn't as good as the first two. Bucky and Sam work with Baron Zemo to get a lead on the Flag Smashers, who incidentally want the world back as it was before the blip. But this episode sort of felt like a series of video game fetch quests. Go here, do that, talk to that NPC, which honestly isn't my favorite thing. But we do get some action along the way, and of course the return of Sharon Carter, who is now pretty cynical.
Oh, she's kind of awful now.
In this episode, they explain a lot more about the motivation of the Flag Smashers, mainly about Carly Morgenthau, but the real villain of the story seems to be the Power Broker, which we haven't seen yet. And I'm glad because frankly, I'm not that intrigued by these so-called Flag Smashers. I mean, the name alone is kind of silly. How do you smash a flag? Overall, this episode felt a little too densely packed, but this is basically a 6-hour movie, so you have to see episode 3 and next week's episode 4 as the second act of a film where the plot usually thickens. It did, however, end on a high note, which I won't spoil if you haven't seen it yet. So even though this was my least favorite episode so far, I'm still very much enjoying the ride. I just realized, and this is true, I usually have an end joke at the end of these reviews, but I forgot. So, yeah. Bye.